continuing with the theme that we are all here for about, and I'm just sort of alluding to the word phoenix there, right? Rising from the ashes, and well, the proverbial rising from the ashes pandemic world. Well, WHO has actually announced that we are maybe almost there. So there is that silver lining very clearly and light at the end of the tunnel. What's also happened during these past 2 years and where we are here now is, and all the conversations that we are actually hearing from the various speakers since yesterday, is that skills now are absolutely at the top of the agenda. And we are talking about the agenda not only for HR, but also for the CEOs, right? So I'm actually going to talk about some facts, and this is essentially coming from a couple of surveys. So of course, the first one at the top there comes from the Gartner Top 5 HR Trends, which talks about 59% of HR leaders globally are actually prioritizing building critical skills for the organization. That actually is coupled with the fact, and the next one is actually a Deloitte CEO survey, which talks about 71% of CEOs are saying that their organizations are actually preparing or in fact have already embarked on the process of workforce and talent transformation. Yeah. Would want to emphasize on the word transformation here because I think, and we all know, the realization that has dawned is, and especially with the experiences that we have gone through, has made us realize that maybe what worked well earlier and what got us here till now may not really get us to where we want to reach from here on, right? And we are talking about the immediate reality as well as the next few years as such. Coupled with that is what ATD actually states, right? The Association of Talent Development. They talk about the fact when they looked at top performing companies, they found that top performing companies are nearly 5 times more likely than low performers to have a robust, sustainable learning culture. What they also found when they spoke to these top performing companies, that almost they are twice as most likely to say that their learning functions help them meet overall business goals, right? Now, what is also happening with that is when we are looking at really future-proofing talent and essentially the fact that people are our advantage in the kind of times that we are living in today and the kind of business changes that are happening, there are certain imperatives which have clearly emerged. And I think I'm just sort of alluding, in fact, even the previous conversation that was happening during the previous panel, there are certain aspects that really stand out, right, when we talk about imperatives. L&D imperatives and CXO imperatives is what I have juxtaposed here. Starting with first, about how do we build that organizational learning culture. When we talk about a sustainable, robust organizational learning culture, what would that mean? How do I really go about it, right? Now, in order to support that, in order to really build a robust skill development, transformative sort of framework, what do I need? So, do I need to invest in technology? What are those ecosystems that I need to build? Again, it's an ecosystem that operates. There's no one way to really achieve that goal for most organizations. The next thing, I think Manpreet talked about the context, right? Learning having context. That's, my friends, is at the front and center today when any learning strategy is being designed by a transformative organization. So contextual and immersive learning with the objective of building skills that are built at speed as well are readily deployable from a business point of view, right? In terms of making people productive or effective in the roles and the functions that they are performing. Cohort learning, by the way, and this is actually a subject in itself, and maybe we can have some conversations around this later as well. But cohort learning is very clearly emerging as an imperative because of the fact that it allows you to leverage collaborative learning and the collective experiences and knowledge that exists rather than just doing self-paced learning, which typically e-learning traditionally has been really delivering till now. Last but not the least, the changes that are happening in our environment, in the industry, in the business environment as such, means that content providers have to bring in content which is recent at the speed of change. Yeah, that's a massive pressure on content providers. On the CXO side, primarily it's about business, right? What are the business goals that they want to achieve? What is the impact that they want to see? Especially correlating skills and talent to the business impact that they are and outcomes that they're looking for. The second one, and by the way, this is also highlighted by the latest EY CEO's imperative survey, the next two that I'm talking about here. The first one is about CEOs focusing on strengthening their core businesses, right? And when we are talking about strengthening core businesses, it's also about strengthening core skills, including functional skills. Next, of course, and I think this is oft repeated, which is about rapid digitalization, building digital skills across roles, levels, across the organization. The last one, which is something which I wanted to highlight, because this typically gets ignored because of a couple of challenges, which is about your workforce in your factories or in the field, on the shop floors, many a times are left out of transformative e-learning or digital learning initiatives because of two challenges. One is, of course, access to technology. The second, very importantly, even in a country like India, most people talk about India being an English-speaking nation. The fact is, there's a very large proportion of our population which is still preferring to learn in a language which is not English because they would find that to be easier and faster to acquire skills with. Many a times, content providers are not able to bring that to the table, and hence that portion is left out, and that's a big here and now HR challenge and a learning challenge many a times that we hear from our customers that we talk to as well. Now, I thought I'll set this context, but the pivot that I want to really make is about saying, hey, there's enough talk about transformation, building skills, really changing the way we are really addressing our talent development. So how do we go about it? Do we really rip and replace? Do we really go with what we are doing, make some modifications, and then go along? How do we really go about it? And that's a dilemma that always remains and comes up, right? So I was talking to a gentleman who's actually present in this audience right now, and we were having a chat about, because his is a company which has actually embarked on a massive transformation, right from really coming up with a totally new learning and development strategy, as well as embarking on the journey of building up a totally new learning ecosystem. This gentleman is right now sitting in the audience, and I would like to call him onto the stage. His name is Rohit Shenoy. He's the Global Head of Learning and Development at DXC Technologies. Rohit, come on stage. Welcome, Rohit.
Thanks, Vinay.
Rohit, thanks for agreeing to actually come in.
Sit-down discussion.
You want to have a sit-down?
Whatever is more comfortable.
Yeah, whatever you're comfortable with. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, thanks, Rohit, for actually agreeing to come in and share with us, because this is something everybody has in their minds in terms of, hey, what's the right way to do? Do we really break barriers and have the courage to totally make a new decision in terms of replacing the ecosystem or coming up with a totally new strategy? DXC is already embarked on that. Firstly, what made you actually do that? Maybe you would want to set some context on that, if you could start with that.
Sure. I think Manpreet made quite a stir here with the use of the word context. All of us are referring to that. So without context, things do not make sense. So I'll just give a context of the organization, and then we'll come to this specific example. So DXC Technology, as some of you might know, is coming together of HP and CSC. And this combined organization didn't really leverage the synergy of these two organizations. And then we had a new CEO, there's an org transformation, a 3-year organization transformation, And that means a lot of relook at the skills that we have and what skills do we develop and what areas of business are we into. And that's the larger context of this transformation.
So, Rohit, obviously, one is about everything that you would do, and before you embark, you would have certain goals that would have really come in. Maybe business sort of came up with something, or maybe the CEO sort of gave certain vision in terms of what DXC would want to achieve. So, what were the real goals that you set before embarking on this journey? And secondly, there's a corollary to the question. What were the criteria that were established in terms of saying, hey, what would success from this transformation really mean? If you could throw some light on that.
Sure. So what were the goals of our transformation? So the main goal is the business goal, which is how do we reduce hiring from outside and have more people deployed internally? And especially if there's one part of the business that's growing very fast and another part of the business that's not growing. So what kind of an employer brand are you setting if you are hiring in one place and degrowing in another place? So that's clearly the other objective that we had. Large organization, 130,000 people, 70 countries. There are multiple learning contracts that are happening across the organization. Some of that we were not even aware of at corporate. So one of the things that we wanted to do is consolidate those contracts. So for example, we had some contracts in Japan, some other contracts in South America, which we did not even know about. So that's one. How do you reduce that future cost as well? That was kind of another objective that we had. From a business perspective, we wanted to simplify things. We had a learning university and then so many platforms that were there. We wanted to simplify that and bring in just a few which are very easy for people and make it like a very simple enterprise search kind of thing. So I think those were the key objectives that we had for it. So another one was a slightly intangible, but it was run like a very tangible one. So the 3-year organization transformation, one of the things was virtual first. It happened during the pandemic, and people first. So people first is driven like an organization objective. For example, the ESG team comes to me and say, what are these projects on people first? What are they doing? And so on. So learning is one of the key aspects of that as well. So those are like the key objectives of this.
So we talk about future-proofing talent, and I think the industry reality is also, like you mentioned, the entire churn that is happening as such, and maybe also preparing your talent for roles that are emerging as such. Did that also sort of play a role in terms of really relooking at what you were doing in terms of your overall learning strategy and the framework as such?
Yeah, so definitely that played a role. There's a lot of new skills that are coming in, and you're constantly changing the names of the skills that come in is quite new. And are the refresh rates of the skills, are they in line with the market? And so parameters like annually, what percentage of content is retired, what percentage of new content comes in, and so on. The second one is, who are the creators? So are the creators the real SMEs, or are they some people who just create content for creating content's sake? That was one more aspect. And once the content is created, do they really nurture it? For example, there's great content and a learner gives a feedback on that. So how often is that refreshed? How often do they just throw the content there? Or are they like a gardener looking at it, tending to it, and so on? So that was one more key feature that we are looking at.
So, and since you talked about this piece as such, obviously, when you were, like you said, you were consolidating your various initiatives that were happening across the globe as such, maybe some of them in silos as such, and when you're really looking at a global sort of engagement. When you did your entire selection, obviously it was a massive exercise. And from what I understand, it was twofold. It was not just on the content front, but also on the technology front, the platforms, etc. Everything coming together as a cohesive ecosystem. What did you overall, if you could talk about maybe 3 or 4 key things that you looked for when you looked for the partners that you would go with, more in terms of your immediate needs as well as in terms of really looking forward in terms of your future needs that would come up? Sure. If you could throw some light on that part.
Sure. So we have a very complex learning ecosystem with so many people. So we wanted to simplify it. And we thought that the best way to do it is one huge strike. Take off everything old, bring in someone new, and that person will solve all our problems. So we had like a huge RFP, global process, 25 partners, potential partners invited, all of them walking the ramp and doing demos and showing what they can do best, and so on. And that was like the process. And we had lots and lots. It was so confusing, and there's so much in the market. You don't know what to choose. Everyone has something which is very nice, and so you need to look at even the subtle aspects. For example, there's someone who comes in and the team has met for the first time. The person who is in delivery doesn't know the person who is in operations, and there's no connect. They don't know which countries we are in, and so on. So those subtle signals, if they can't do it during sales time, you can't expect them to do that during delivery time. So that was one of the criteria. What we found out is there's nobody in the market who can solve all your problems. We had to then break up the RFP and do it into multiple pieces there and see who's good at what and what can they really do. And then build a tech platform that will kind of integrate all of these, or take a tech platform that will integrate all of these elements.
Thanks, Rohit. I think I know there is a lot more that went into it, and I'm sure maybe some offline conversations you would be happy to sort of talk about that. Just one final question, and I know time's up really for us, but just final questions. If you were to leave the audience with possibly 3 personal learnings or takeaways that you came out of this entire initiative as such, personally, which you would want to share with the audience.
Yeah. So I think one is keep your tech team really close. There were lots of what we thought we'll have as a solution and what we actually have. There was a difference between that. So expect surprises when you're doing a large implementation, and then plan for those surprises. That's something that's definitely there. I have summarized 2 more, which I'll take up. So that's definitely for one. The other one is the partnership. So relationship beyond the contract is a term that we use. The contract is something that is there, but are they willing to go beyond the contract? Do they mirror your organization structure? For example, we are global, and do they have a global team that supports that? Across time zones, also can they support that? Do they have the flexibility to go beyond the contract? So that becomes very important to look at. So expect surprises, great partnerships. Then one more element which I missed out is it's not the learning that's important. To post-learning, what are the labs? What are the assessments? How do you check that there's learning that's happened? Do they have workplaces to practice, which is very important for IT? So those elements are something that we also looked at. We also had like some of our tenets to go back to. Not all of them were met. We said we want the latest and greatest content. We want the solution to be cheap and cheerful. All of that, everything can't be met. So one of the key learning is that relook at your strategy and your criteria during the process, and keep business really close, because we're not doing anything for ourselves. It is for the business, so keep them really close through the entire implementation.
Fantastic. I think those were very practical insights, Rohit. Thanks for sharing. I don't know whether we have time for many questions, but can I get at least two audience questions? Thanks so much. 2 questions, please. Yes.
So, see, there are a lot of learning platforms. There's a lot of learning content in the market today. How do you what becomes important is today the agility with which you can bring that content in. And for that, it is important for that content to be customized to your business. Now, how do you handle that? Because that's something that, what is there in the market does not apply immediately to your business. It has to get customized. So how do you tackle that?
Yeah. So very relevant question. And at the speed at which learning is expected to deliver, you can't really start creating the content. By the end time you complete that, then it's no more relevant. So I think contextualization is the key. We just recently won 2 Brandon Hall Awards. Both of them were for gold awards. Both of them were for cohort-based learning journeys. So we use the content, you don't create it, get the SMEs, let them look at the content, then you contextualize that, create very minimal content. Be very lazy when creating content. So get lazy in the sense, look at that as the last option. So get in a few conversations or discussions, then get in this other content, blend in the experience. I think the entire secret is in the blend. How do you blend through cohort-based learning? You get in the digital part, you put in the organization one, and then create those journeys which are integrated online, offline. I think that's the best one. And also create some kind of what's in it for me. What will change after the learning happens? As in, that's the partnership with the business. Is the person getting something which is different from what they were getting earlier? Is it a starting criteria for doing something else? Are you hiring internally based on those criteria and so on? So it's not just the learning that's there, but how you contextualize that entire learning. And having partners will help you with ideas and what they've done earlier and all of that really helps as well.
Thank you.
Any other question? Rohit? You be good?
Oh, that's great.
Thanks, Rohit. I think the key there was about, while everyone knows that it needs to be done, right? Many a times in terms of the how part is what is the challenging part. And I think you coming in here really helped understand that to a large extent. So thanks so much for really taking our time and sharing that with us. Thanks, Rohit. Thank you. Thanks very much.